Happy today. I am William Brown from IamWilliamBrown.com. Uh, this is Disconnect to Connect, one word conversations. And this is going to be a fun show because many of you know that I have a conversation around self love and self awareness and self care and just a higher awareness of self because I believe within that understanding or that awareness, everything and anything is possible. And it's kind of funny because yesterday and was a long day. Again, Thursdays sometimes I overbook myself, and I just kind of I'm like used to the end. But there was if you have an opportunity to look at some of the shows from yesterday, they're on our Disconnect to Connect Conversations YouTube channel, and you can binge watch, right? So I don't know if you have all that time on your hands, but watching all those some of the old shows. But today, our word is self. And it was very interesting when I was, looking for things and just kind of, doing some research on words. Um, Most of the time, self is not, by itself, which is kind of strange. It's like self plus something, plus discipline, plus, care, plus, something. Usually there's not much conversations just on self and unpacking self. So that's what we're going to do today. I've invited my friend in, and we are going to have a one word conversation.
Hello.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I am doing great. This is the time where I ask my guests to introduce themselves however it feels comfortable to them.
Mhm. Well, great. So first of all, I got to say that as you were introducing this show, seeing the picture behind you, I just got the feeling like we were on a adult version of Sesame Street. And the word of today is self.
Right.
Brought to you by the word self.
Right.
So
That's great.
my name is JD. I live here in Greenville, South Carolina. I've lived here for several years. I'm married with a wife and three kids. My oldest, which has already left the house and is off exploring life on his own, and I have two more still at home, both teenagers.
Hmm.
For work, I am a children's entertainer. I tell people when they ask me what I do for a living, I tell them I just look at them straight face. I tell them I do latex,
Hmm.
and then and then when they when it just kind of registers for a minute, and they ask me usually what I do with it, I just tell them with a really straight face that I manipulate latex, and um, and then eventually I get around to tell them that I'm a professional balloon artist.
Right.
I've been a professional balloon artist for several years, and love what I do. So
Wonderful.
yeah.
Well, thank you for being here today. So the question of the day is, how does self land for you?
It was interesting when you asked me um, to talk about self. Uh, it actually brought tears to my eyes because one of the things that we do as human beings, because we have language, we can identify ourselves as self. I
Hmm.
don't think that an animal. I don't think my dog actually has a concept of self.
Hmm.
My dog has a concept of food, water, got to go to the bathroom,
Right.
but doesn't have a actual concept of self, and the concept of self arises in language.
Hmm.
And I'm in the process of writing a kids book right now called Unbullyable. And one of the things that the character in the book gets to do is gets to discover that he's not his shoes.
Hmm.
And it's amazing how much we identify ourselves as the things that we have.
Right.
The I identify myself as my house and my job and my kids and my height, my weight, my looks, my color, my all the stuff, right?
Right.
And none of it's me.
Right.
And so what I get down to is who I am is the experiencer of all the things that I have in my life.
Hmm. Wow. No, I totally get that. And I think it goes into, my conversation about labels, or it's really around labels, because beyond our labels is what I believe is awareness of self. Is that awareness? And too often, I believe we stop at our labels, or we allow the labels to decide who we are. We really find meaning, we find direction, we find language in those labels. And so congratulations, on your children's books. When I work started feeling that my beyond the labels conversation was going to be a book, I was challenged with um, basically speaking it and so a child could understand. So I ended up with a couple children's books, because called Beyond the Shell and Will the Turtle, and most within that conversation is what makes you you. And it's just that question, that evaluation, that curiosity, to, like you were saying, that is it my skin? Is it my family? Is it the things that I do, or the things that I don't do? Is it the things that I think about, or the things that I don't think about? And really leaving the reader to say that it's all of those things and none of those things, because we get to decide as
Right.
the observer, as um, the person aware of all the things that are having on. That self gets to decide. So go be you. So go do that. Show up as that. And too often it is so difficult. So why do you think there's so many connections to self, instead of just walking or being um, fully self-expressed?
It's interesting. The only the only way that we have the word self, the only way that that word exists is if we have the word you. So the only way that there is a me
Hmm.
is if there is a you. Because if you were to imagine floating through space with nothing else,
Hmm.
no time, no, I mean, just in vast nothingness, there would be you'd be the awareness, but you only get to distinguish what self is when there's something that's not self.
Right.
And
Right.
so if there was nothing, then we wouldn't even be able to get self. And so it's interesting for me that, especially with what the world is going through today, that there is no me knowing me without you.
Right.
And so how much the actual concept of self doesn't just lie here with me. It is about you. It is about who I am in the world is has to come into play with what's going on in the world.
Right. So what I got, and so you can help me if I'm hearing it differently. It's not about comparison, that I think that happens a lot. It is just, you know, I think it's a little bit more than awareness, but it's an appreciation of the you, so I can see me. So I can, kind of know. And I think too often I compare myself to you, but not knowing who I am. But it's not, I don't need to compare myself to you. I just be me. And sometimes when I have a conversation around you and me and all that kind of stuff, they get, the language is garbled, and it gets confusing for me. So it's like, I hope you understand and follow where I'm going here. but
But
it.
I think the case could be made that I'm not actually talking to you right now. I'm
Hmm,
talking to my mental construct that I have of who William Brown is.
hmm,
Like I don't actually know you. I have a construct of William Brown as this guy that's he does Toastmasters and does a daily podcast and wears purple shirts and is married and has written some books. And I've made a mental framework,
right.
and how I relate to you is um, actually a construct of me.
Hmm,
And if I relate to you with with guile, I don't know if that's where a word. If I relate to you with anger or hatred or bitterness or whatever, that it's probably something inside of me
right.
that is projecting that onto you.
Right. Well, so it
And
has. Go ahead.
well, and it just gets back to self. Like, what is self?
Right.
Like, like just seeing the lens through this whole world. Like when I watched the news and see what's going on in the news,
Right.
the stuff comes up for me that gets comes up for me. Um, a lot of times is it's like I think that that's what comes up for everybody,
Right. Mm,
and it's not. It's what is in me for what there is for me to deal with, and what I've got from my life,
right.
and maybe inside of being the change that I want to see in the world, noticing the stuff that comes up for me, and instead of trying to fix the world around me, asking myself the question, who is it that I'm committed to being, and
Right.
being the change, and you know, as far as self.
Right. It goes back to the I guess the concept or the words that it's an inside job. It's the work that we need to do, and it's like we are conditioned, and sometimes I hate using that word, but sometimes that seems like the only language that that I have in this area. But we are conditioned to not blame or find reasons or to justify why someone else is showing up a certain way, and it has nothing to do with us. That person is just an asshole, right? It has nothing
Oh
to
yeah.
do with
Oh
me, right?
yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
and
Toxic.
it's like, but
They're toxic.
right. The more that I look at myself and look at what I am accepting or rejecting or just have an awareness of, then how that person that I labeled something, that may change, that may expand to something else. My construct of them moves into another level, and why, and if I am willing to look in, and see. Um, so it's kind of interesting how we, and I think going back to scripture, Christian scripture of do unto others, right, as you want others to unto you, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. And if you don't love yourself, in some cases we can't even love ourselves because we have no awareness of self to extend love. And
You know,
so yeah, so
it's
wow.
interesting, and sitting inside of Christian scripture, judge not lest you be judged.
Right.
For the measure that you use to judge, it'll be mused back to you.
Right.
And it's interesting how much when I judge the actions of other people, um, and there's a there's the judging the people, and then the actions that I take consistent with the judgment.
Right.
In other words, do I justify? Do I take actions that I don't agree with for myself, but I justify those actions based on, well, it's acceptable for them because they did X, so I'm going to do Y. I would normally do Y, but
Right.
Y is acceptable because they did X.
Right.
And then just noticing that that's like I justify my actions based on my judgment,
Right.
um, instead of being true to like, look, who am I and what am I really up to
Right.
on the planet, and
Wow.
uh, and then taking my actions consistent with that, not justifying my actions based on the actions of someone else. It's interesting, because I'm kind of, inside the just the inquiry of self,
Hmm.
um, and I see that there is no me without you,
Right.
and at the same time, and it sounds like I'm contradicting myself, but the reality is there is no you. It's all me.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like it is just how I see you as a construct of
Right.
how I view the world and how I see myself. And so inside of that, how do I bring about change that I want to see in the world? I think that if we don't get who we are on the level of self,
Right.
I don't believe we can actually bring change in the world,
Right. I
because
go ahead.
ultimately, unless I get who I am on the level of self, I'm continuing to, um, fight against something inside of me
Right.
and saying that it's you. Like, I don't like
Right.
guys that wear purple shirts. You should wear a purple shirt. That's wrong,
Mm. Right. It's like, yeah.
right?
Right.
Instead of actually going, who am I and what am I creating? And what is it about me that doesn't like purple shirts? And then that allows me to get over there with you and ask you, like, what has you wear a purple shirt? And it
Right.
puts me in a space of curiosity versus space of judgment, which I love how
Right.
one of your words is curious.
Right.
Um, Curious gives myself access to stuff that judgment, blocks me from.
Right. No, I have mentioned a number of times the difficulty with self conversations, um, is that there has to be a maturity factor. There has to be a level of maturity, and what I mean that without an immature awareness of yourself, um, is, in my thinking, selfish. So, it is, then it's all about me to the detriment of anything and everyone else. But I believe at a mature, recognition of me, self, then as I say that we're on this individual journey, with others, that so the more that I recognize the others that show up in my life, because I cause them to show up because of my awareness and because um, my ability to move through my journey and through my life. But as soon as I have no recognition of them, or I demonize them, or dismiss them, then it is it is a reflection of the work that I am not doing, or the what I'm not understanding about myself, that I would even be I don't want to say concerned, but kind of allow that to dictate how I am showing up, and not. So it is a very, mature, grown up conversation to even, really embrace self on a level that you can be a contribution in the world
Hmm.
versus just taking from it.
Let me see if I can re-say what you just said
Okay.
distinctly, and then correct me if I'm wrong. I think what you just
Okay.
said was that an immature level of self is that it's all about you to the detriment of others.
Yes.
And a mature view of self is that it's all about you to the benefit of others.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
And
and,
so,
and inside of that conversation, what's interesting is it's all about me to the benefit of others and disappearing that there is an other. Like almost as I can begin to relate to you as I relate to myself, and disappearing the otherness of it.
right.
In other words, I see you as I see me.
Right.
Um,
Right.
I'm not saying that I've attained that, but that's ultimately what the goal is, to begin to disappear the us versus them.
Right.
And
And there's so, go ahead.
not only to not just to disappear it, but to accept. Not so when I say disappear, I don't mean fight against it or put it down or defeat it.
Right.
I I
Got
think
it.
that to accept that there is an us versus them,
Hmm.
because it's in our our makeup to create an us versus them in our safety. So look, it's it's you know us white guys and you black guys. But then if you put the two of us in a room full of all women, it would be us men versus those women. And if you
Right.
took the men and the women together, and we all happen to be Clemson fans, and you put us
Right.
in a room with USC fans, it'd be us. All of a sudden, it's us Clemson fans. And then if you
Right.
took all of us and dropped us in the middle of Asia, where we're the only English-speaking people, it'd be us English speakers. So to understand that the us versus them is a survival mechanism, and it's a primary, not a primary, it's it's like it's ingrained in us to create groups and tribes and stuff, and understand that gives us the ability to go beyond. Understanding gives us the ability to go beyond and disappear the divide.
Right. No, I get it, and I don't say I don't get it, but when, when the start of the pandemic started, there was a lot of talk of, we're all in this together. We, right? And it wasn't sitting right with me, and I was like, I care about other people, but that we, I don't understand. I don't know the we that they're talking about. We, Americans, we human, what we, it doesn't feel like we're all in this together, because we're all dealing with this differently. This all occurs to us, each other differently. There are some people that still had to go to work. There are some people that, their business shut down and they lost everything. And there's some people who died. It's like there wasn't for me this collective we that a lot of people were talking about. And as you were, I loved how you just went through and how we created the others. I don't think it is where we are created that way. I think that is just something that a construct that we needed for the other survival. My language, the label, you know. So we created the construct of race so we can have, dare I say, winners and losers, because it's a race. My understanding of race is somebody wins and somebody doesn't win. Somebody, it's like Ricky Bobby says, right? If you're not first, you're last. I mean, that's a mentality that people have around race, and who would have thought I would have brought Ricky Bobby into this? but
Sweet dear baby Jesus lying in the manger.
right, but that's the mentality of it. Until we really let go that construct, then the us, the we, the other that we have to create for survival, in some cases go away, because we are clearly all in this together, because we recognize our humanity, we recognize our experiences, we recognize who we are to a level that you are me. Then we're we. And then we can move and make decisions to support that, versus this, okay, it's we until it's not we. Where we until you break shit, right? Where we until all that other kind of stuff happens. And so it is more of a socialization or a conditioning to really decide what the we are. Sometimes, going to, colleges, the allegiance to colleges and their colors, that is on a surface great and wonderful, but it just goes overboard. Like when we hold on too closely to that orange or that maroon, then it gets crazy. Then it gets like, dude, it's just football, or it's just, it's, there's something more important than that.
It's interesting. So, and for anybody that's watching this that doesn't live in South Carolina, when you talk about hanging on to the orange or the maroon, we're talking about Clemson and USC again, right?
Right.
It goes back to the level of who I am. Who am I on the level of self? And someone that sees themselves as who I am, like myself, who I am, is a Clemson fan.
Right.
Then when Clemson wins the game, maybe it makes sense to turn over a maroon car or something stupid, right?
Mm-hmm.
But but being able to connect with who am I really as a human being? Who am I on the planet as a human? And allowing myself to connect to others' humanity. I think it's just such more interesting conversation.
Right.
And we get something out of creating a divide.
There's a benefit in that, right? Mm-hmm.
There is a benefit, and I think that not judging the benefit, noticing when there is a benefit. It's fun to go root for your favorite team. And wear the colors and do the stuff, right? But then knowing when, hey, knowing when to where to draw the line, the identity that, yeah, I enjoy identifying myself as this, and it's not me. Like it doesn't ultimately define who I am. If my favorite team loses on Sunday, am I depressed on Monday?
Right.
And maybe I've taken a little bit too far, as maybe I've lost sight of self. Maybe
Right.
I've lost sight of self.
Right.
If who I am is depressed on Monday because my team lost.
Right.
Or if I get to the point where my team loses or the coach makes a bad call and I get angry and I destroy property or do something stupid.
Right.
Maybe it goes back to my identity and myself and who I am, and really being able to look at really who am I, and I'm not my sports team.
Right.
I'm not my shoes.
Right.
And if you ever watch Fight Club, Tyler Durden would say, "I'm not my fucking khakis.
Right.
I'm not my bank account.
Right.
I'm not my bank account." I forget what all the things he says. You're not your bank account. You're not your fucking khakis.
Right. I and that's the conversation around labels. I am my labels and I'm not my labels at the same time.
Yes.
And the more that I embrace that, I can show up as something and not show up as something. When we were talking about Clemson and and the South Carolina, I a couple years ago I took my son to a game. We went to a Clemson Pitt game in, I guess, is it Death Valley? Is that what the stadium? I'm trying to remember. There's a couple Death Valleys out there. I've heard, but Clemson has one also. But we wore on my leading, because it was a sellout crowd. That was a year that they, I think won the championship and everything. But it was a sellout crowd. But I'm from Pittsburgh, and we're from Pittsburgh. And so I wanted to kind of see Pitt play in this game. However, I wanted to enjoy the game without 70,000 people looking at me or being concerned who I was cheering for. So I didn't have the freedom to like openly cheer for Pittsburgh. I made that decision, and I was like, yeah, you know what? We're just here enjoying the day. And the crazy thing is that, Pitt won the game. And we are like quietly smiling, cheering, cheering around 70 disappointed, Clemson fans. But it was more about, for me, in that moment of, I want to belong, right? There was an awareness of self that I had and I didn't have that would show up as a Pitt fan, in this environment. And how there's a saying that how you do anything is how you do everything.
Yeah.
There is a level I became aware for myself that's how I was showing up in my life, of showing up to belong, but having something else underneath that I was hiding or just kind of dealing with on a sub level. And so people really didn't know, or I felt that I couldn't really tell people, what I was feeling, what I wanted, what I are doing it. And that shit just got old. That just, there was an end to that. And it's like, the more that I became aware of that and how that I was showing up, the more I was curious about that. Look, will some 70,000 people be upset if I was a Pitt fan going, yeah, but it's like, oh yeah, we're talking about team. And it's like, yeah, whatever. We get this one. Hey, that was our big win of the year, so give us one, right? But it's that type of my identity, even though I'm a part of, the Steeler Nation, if the Steelers lose on Sunday, my Mondays are okay. So it is, are good. And some of the Steeler Nation fans like, I cannot believe you feel, you just said that, but it is that reality. So really recognizing, are looking at how I'm showing up, how I'm, what the awareness that I have of myself. And when I am choosing not to show myself is really something that I have finally owned. I have finally, do I understand everything about myself? Absolutely not. I tell people that I have an actionable awareness of self. I have a awareness of myself that I can stay in action. And my goal is to get more awareness so I can create more actions and do more things. But that's that's the journey. That's the game. That's what we're up to. That's what I'm up to, I guess.
It's interesting. I gotta say, one of my guilty pleasures is being a balloon artist when I'm making a balloon creation for somebody. And I have a kid, and he'll be, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years old, and I'll look at the dad. He'll be wearing something USC, wearing a Gamecock hat, or wearing something to that effect.
Right.
And I'll just randomly start pulling out balloons to make the kid, and I'll just happen to randomly pick a purple and an orange
Right.
balloon, and just act like I'm just picking random colors. And like
Right.
and a lot of times the dad doesn't even realize he's wearing a USC hat, but I notice it.
Wow.
And
Right.
then I just start making something orange and purple, and just to watch just wait for the reaction. And it's terrible. It's terrible. I do it. I know it. It's one of my guilty things I probably shouldn't do, but it's so much fun to watch the reaction. And then saying something to the effect, and I could care less which team wins, honestly, but saying something to the effect of, "Oh, well, I could make it. I could change the colors, but usually I only make the colors of winning teams." So
Right.
and just to watch that response of like, oh, and I'll do the same thing to somebody that's that's if the Death were in Clemson, I'll do the same thing. I'll make them something black and garnet and just for fun.
Right.
And if they say I don't like, well, we don't like Gamecocks, I'll go great. How about I add some white? And we'll make it Alabama, and that's even worse.
Right.
Just to kind of rub them. But something that you said on that level of self and being able to be fully self-expressed
Mm.
and being okay with it.
Mm.
That was really cool. I noticed that sometimes that I'll do stuff where I'll have to look and check my motive, like I'm going to do this thing and what's my motive? And my motive when I'm doing it to do balloons is typically to bring fun, to bring a little bit of tension to that, and then a laugh. And
Right.
But noticing like who am I in all the situations, and I think who I'm creating to myself to be is love.
Right.
And
Got it.
switching the tone a little bit, because I want to be clear that when somebody does get depressed on Monday because their team lost, or when when a bunch of people get together and riot, because somebody got killed, tragically killed in a police thing. My first response was, how do I sit back and judge what they're doing?
Right.
And that's why I mentioned earlier the Bible verse about judge not, lest you be judged. And when I started looking at curiosity, like how could this occur to them, that the way to really deal with this is to go loot a Target store.
Right.
And all of a sudden it gave me access to compassion.
Hmm.
And just so I just, for myself, what I'm creating is, how do I see the world? How do I consistently, because the world of judgment is so right there. I make myself feel good by putting others down, and I make myself feel right by making others wrong.
Right.
But how do I, as on the level of self, begin to see the actions of others through compassion,
Right.
to give me access to really seeing what they're going through, and it gives me access to be a part of the healing process and creating a new future to live into.
Right. Hmm.
And it's funny, even as I say that, I'm taken back to the first time we ever met. The first time we ever met, we were talking about the 3 laws of performance
Right.
in the book,
Mm-hmm.
and how a thing occurs. First, someone will dictate their actions, which will create the results.
Right.
And just being curious with like, wow, how must it be for you? I mean, how must it be for you to have your team lose and you be depressed on Monday? Like
Right.
how, like, wow, what's that like? Being like that, not from a judgment, but just a space of curiosity, or what must you be feeling that has you feel like the only way you can be heard is to, turn over and burn a car or something to that effect.
Right.
Um, and just and I say that still inside the level of self, like who am I?
Right.
Who am I, and how am I committed to being the change that I want to see in the world?
Right.
And so, being myself is curious.
Right. Yeah, I think I really appreciate that. I think there's a couple things that come up for me in that I I believe part of that expression of rage, disappointment, anger, fear um, is, in my opinion, to go back to what a therapist said to me, we either talk things out or we act things out. And what are those things? I think those things are our emotions, our expression, and so a part of that is that. And for many of us that have the African American label or identity, there is a feeling, there is a belief that we cannot fully express the gamut of our emotions. Because if I show up as angry, if I show up as frustrated, now I am a threat. That's the belief. It may not be true. I'm not saying that it is or not, but that is a belief that I have. That so that's why I manage my self-expression. And when I manage my self-expression, I limit how I cause myself in the world. And so I think a lot of this conversation that is happening loud and violently and anything is an attempt to be fully expressed so conversations can happen, so things can change, so we can do that. A little game that I have that I've been playing for myself is that in that book, Three Laws of Performance, I have changed it to the three laws of self-expression.
Hmm.
So if I look at those laws not as performing in my business, performing in my life or anything like that, but how am I showing up as an individual, as a unique human being in this world, and going through looking at my language, looking how the world occurs to me, and really um, looking forward in that expression and using that type of that language and mindset, then I can show up as myself. That's when I have access to be myself. How people receive me, that's a whole nother story or conversation. But the more that I have the freedom to show up fully or as fully as I understand, then anything is possible and anything is available to me. And then, like I said, then I will manage how people receive that or don't receive that or manage that for themselves.
Hmm. Yeah, what I heard you say was that maybe possibly part of the part of the riots that are going on, maybe that's part of the healing process.
Yes.
Maybe, or maybe that's part of the necessary. I might not like it,
Right.
um, but it might be part of the journey of the healing process.
Right.
And it's interesting. I was on the call with a bunch of my peers, and in just this particular call, I was the only white guy on the call, and the guys were talking about one of the riots in Atlanta. They're attacking the CNN building, and there's a white guy with a skateboard beating on the CNN building. And they're like, "What's a white guy doing there?" And I said, it was wild, because I could totally understand the for me, when I watched the video, the anger that came up in me was
Mhm.
the feeling of powerlessness.
Hmm.
See, how it occurred for me behind my eyes was it wasn't a racial thing; it was a powerless thing. Here was a man on the ground with cops doing this thing, and it was totally unjust. It didn't show up as a racial thing for me,
Right.
right? And so I was taken back to times when I've been powerless in dealing with law enforcement
Hmm.
and unheard and
Right.
and accused of doing something I didn't do, and actually having to go spend a night in jail and spend a lot of money in bail and all the stuff that comes with that to prove my innocence of something I didn't do.
Right.
My powerlessness came up. I said I can understand exactly why there's some dude with the skateboard beating on the CNN building, because it's his powerlessness for the injustice that he had done to him.
Right.
And all of a sudden it just took on a different thing, and then how do you vocalize that, and then to bring it back to self. It's okay for me personally. Yep, something happened. It was unjust. I didn't deserve it, and that happened. Now, how do I deal with it, and who am I committed to being, and who is the future that I'm living into?
Right.
And one of the craziest things that I ever did. Um, and I realize we're right at time, and I'll say it fast. Um, I remember getting arrested for something I didn't do. So I spent a night in jail, um, and it was a life changing experience. If you've ever spent a night in jail, William, I highly
I can
recommend it.
imagine. I have not. I can.
uh,
That's
it'll
one of the
it'll
things that are not on my list to do. Right.
it will change your life. Um, but I remember getting out, and it was about a year later. I was driving down the road, and I watched somebody got pulled over, and the police, it was a woman, was actually arresting a man at the time. And I remember hating her. Like, I hated that woman. I hated her for who she represented, and the injustice I had. But it's so wild. I had been doing so much work on myself, and just experiencing peace and joy in my life,
Hmm.
that I was able to notice that hatred that I had for that woman as almost like as a foreign object.
Hmm.
I was like, ooh, that's something that a year prior that I would have entertained that hatred because it gave me an inauthentic sense of power.
Hmm.
Um, but I was able to notice that hatred, and I said, that's not who I'm committed to being. Who I'm committed to being is love, and someone who lives in joy and peace in my life. And I actually, the next day, I cleared my schedule off for the entire morning, and I drove to the police department, and I backed my car in so I was in the parking lot, but I was looking at the building,
Mhm.
and I just started forgiving everybody that worked there. Everybody, it didn't matter who, if they walked in out of the building, I just forgave them, and just
Hmm.
forgave them. And it was a lot of tears. I was wearing sunglasses, so people walking by wouldn't see the tears just flowing down from my face. But it after I'd forgiven them and I was like ready to go, I wouldn't say it's the voice of God, but the voice in my head that is wisdom beyond like who I am. Say,
Mhm.
great, you forgave them. Now bless them.
Hmm.
Now bless them to do their job and to do it effectively, and love them. And I was like, I can't. I can't.
Hmm.
And and the response was, you know what? Bless them.
Hmm.
And there was I remember at the time there was an officer that he was particularly one of the officers that was he's the guy that does all the school stuff. He's the crossing guard, and he does all the school things. I said, okay, I
Right.
can bless him. I can bless him. And so I blessed him to have wisdom at his job, and just really start praying for, like, speaking blessings over him.
Hmm.
And the shift that it broke open to me, all of a sudden there was a freedom in me to be almost like you at a Clemson, and being a Pitt fan at Clemson. There's a freedom in me to be that wasn't ever there before.
Hmm.
Um, and the freedom to love. And it's funny because I find that, and this has been a couple years ago, there's time that I have to continually, like, and forgive them, not because what they did was right,
Right.
because me forgiving them is not about them.
Right.
Me forgiving them was letting my own self out of my own trap.
Right.
So I mean, they say that unforgiveness is eating poison, waiting for that person to die.
Right.
Uh, the forgiveness was for me to step into my power and know who I am.
Right.
And it again all goes back to the level of self, like who am I?
Right. It's like we started, and thanks for sharing that story. It is that it's all about us. It's all about me, um, and how I'm going to show up for other people and for the world. And I really appreciate this conversation. Um, is there any last thing that you want to say before we end this conversation, and it kind of takes on another form in our life, because that's somehow it happens, for me, that I have this conversation for 45 minutes to an hour, and then it takes over my day. It really sits with me. So is there anything that you want to end this conversation about self?
Yes. Thank you.
Hmm.
Thank you for um, thank you for being willing to take on having conversations that make a difference.
Hmm.
Thank you for being willing to take on conversations to have people notice that they are their label and they're not their label at the same time. Because that conversation gives people access to so much freedom in their life and the ability to create a brand new future when I can keep the labels that serve me and notice the labels that don't serve me and give those up and create new ones, and just it creates a creation. And thank you for being willing to take on that conversation and make a difference on the planet.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, my friend. I'm going to put you back in the green room while in the show, and we'll say our goodbyes from there.
All right.
Okay. Well, um, I guess George Costanza was right. It's not you, it's me. you know. So my um, my desire, my prayer for you is to find the joy in you, discover the shadows, of you. No excuses, no judgment. Just become aware of that. And the more you come aware of you, the more that you can show up. The world wants you, the world needs you, and the world is waiting for you. So go be you. Have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you tomorrow morning at 11 a.m.